rangatira, tēnā koto katoa. We acknowledge that there is strength beyond ourselves when we work together to serve others. May we put aside our own personal interests, work with integrity and openness, striving to create a community that supports its people and the environment. Let us, in a moment of quiet, focus on why we are here. We give thanks for the wisdom of the past, look for opportunities in the future, and accept the challenges of the future. Tēnei te mihi, kia koutou katoa, kia pai te haere. Thank you. Welcome everybody to the first council meeting of 2020, and it's great to see such a spectacular turnout from the Bridge Club. Welcome to all of you. We're a standing room. Going through our order of business, first we have apologies, and we do have apologies from Councillor Sally Crown. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Bogue and Councillor Wright. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. And sorry, I must also advise the meeting, of course, is being live streamed, and we are also recording for administrative purposes. So, do we have any conflicts of interest?
NCBI. I'll step out.
No other? And yes, our first item is, of course, the public forum. We will be having a presentation from the Taradale Bridge Club, Ash Fitchett and Joe Hayes, and welcome to all of you. Looking forward to seeing your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor Wise, and good morning, City Councillors. Most of us here are from the Taradale Bridge Club. I am co-president Jan Davis.
I'm Joe Hayes, co-president.
And I'm Ash Fitchett.
First of all, let me assure you we are not here to ask for money, but we wish to invest in the development of our city. And we seek to lease a small piece of council reserve land on which to build some new premises. You will all have received our business case. It was sent out to you, which we prepared and submitted. What we're here to do is to reinforce that case, to highlight the key points, and to answer any questions. Our club was founded in 1975, and today this is only a portion of our membership. We have well over 200 members. Most of them live in the Taradale Green Meadows area, and most of them are in the 60+ age group. Every week we have 5 sessions of bridge over a period of 4 days. And during the year we have some 2-session tournaments on a Saturday. For many years we operated out of our premises in Devonshire Place in Taradale, but we outgrew that building and we sold it in 2017. For the last 10 years, we leased a very nice room in the Taradale Club, but we were told last year, just 4.5 months before the lease was due to be renewed, that it wasn't going to be renewed, and we had a very short time to find somewhere else to live. We looked at over 40 properties in the Taradale Green Meadows area, and none of them were suitable. Fortunately, the Napier Bridge Club said that we could lease their premises because our sessions are at different times. And that's where we are now, but it is not a very happy situation because we have to cope with graffiti with damaged cars, vandalism, and so we've had to pay for security in the evenings so that nothing untoward happens. This week, in the afternoon, on Monday afternoon, well over 6 cars, we haven't got the exact number, were very badly damaged. Every car is going to cost at least $1,000 to have repairs, and one is well over $4,000. So now we're paying for someone during the daytime for security purposes. So you can see, we don't regard this as a suitable permanent solution. We are the Taradale Bridge Club, and we'd really like to get back to that area as soon as possible.
We've had discussions with 3 different organisations about the possibility of a joint build, but only one of those is still live, and that's with the Hawke's Bay Rugby Union. We've put a request to them, and that will be discussed at their February or March meeting. We require a room with space for 24 card tables that we can leave set up semi-permanently, and we also need space for toilets, kitchen, office and storage, about 260 square metres in total. And we need adjacent car parking for about 40 cars. We have access to sufficient funds for the building, but not to purchase the land as well. We're seeking approval from you to lease reserve land in the Park Island area, preferably. There's a couple of circles on the map there that I'm sure you can see, which would possibly be our preferred areas. And we'd like it, if possible, adjacent to existing car parking so we don't encroach on any more green space. We've got cash reserves of $500,000. We've discussed funding grants with the Eastern and Central Community Trust and the Lotteries Commission, and we're confident that we can meet their criteria. We've established a building subcommittee, had preliminary plans drawn up and priced. We've consulted other bridge clubs around New Zealand who've built new facilities recently to ensure that we get this right. And Kevin's constructed a model of our proposed building so that you've got something visual to see.
This is the proposed building model. It's not just an ordinary square model. We try to build in a bit of, something that doesn't just look like a building stuck on a property.
Thank you.
The roof
It's not leaking, is it?
comes off and you can actually see the inside of the,
Nice.
so it gives you a rough idea of what we're looking at to build.
Very good.
It won't come off on the proper building though.
No dogs.
Thank you, Kevin. So the Taradale Bridge Club provides an activity that supports local and national ageing strategies. Bridge is an intellectually stimulating, competitive and social game, able to be played when one becomes less active. It can contribute to the mitigation of memory loss, loneliness and reduced physical capacity. It enhances opportunities for social connections and participation. The Taradale location will bring the aforementioned attributes to the maturing Taradale population. Bridge participation locally and nationally is growing as the population ages and has a long-term future. As you will have seen in our annual accounts, we are financially sound with the capacity to build and maintain a new facility. The facility will be available for community use. We've had discussions with U3A who can struggle to find a permanent venue for some of their activities, several of which would be a good fit for our room. The Napier City Country Music Club is looking for a permanent home for their 100 or so members, and we are working with them on the possibility of our proposed facility being that place, and 2 of their representatives are here today. We are open to approaches from other groups and clubs whose activities could cater within our facility. A precedence has been set by Council with numerous community groups leasing council land for their club rooms. Many bridge clubs around the country are successfully established on council reserve land. So, in summary, we are here accompanied by a large group of our members representing the Taradale Bridge Club to seek not money but a small piece of reserve land on which to build a new club room. Whilst we have temporary premises, we need to relocate back to the Taradale Green Meadows area as soon as possible. This will allow us to again provide important social and intellectual activities in the local area, which in turn supports the Council's positive ageing strategy. We have cash reserves of $500,000 to invest in a new building. The building will not just be for our use. We have other community groups interested in using the facility. The ideal location for the club rooms is in the Park Island area. All of this and more is contained in our business case, to which we trust you will give serious consideration. We believe we have a sound case and ask that you approve our application when it formally comes before you. Has anybody got any questions?
Thank you very much. Councillors, any? Councillor Crystal.
I'd just like to say what a wonderful business plan you put together. It was very thorough, and having spoken pre-election about this, I am totally behind you and support your application. As the Taradale Ward Councillor, I think it's really important for our ageing population, of which I have parents and obviously am ageing myself, for the future of Taradale. So I think, and also the fact that I know Joe and I spoke about getting multi-use people, and you've obviously gone out and done that. And so you have, your membership will cover your operational costs and things like that, so you don't need any other funding, is that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Ongoing, we have the sufficient funds to cope with the maintenance of the building, insurance. We've done all those rough costing figures.
Yeah.
And that's without putting our subs on.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's great to see so many people here supporting you today, and I too support you being able to relocate into the community of your choice. Would you be open to the idea of the building being designed so that it could be removable, so that if in the future that space was required for something else that was no longer needed, the building could be easily removed to another site?
Sure, we could do that. I don't see that as a problem. We'd have to consult.
Leave it out to
Think
the
about
designers.
Yes. Thank you.
We hope that it never needs to be relocated.
Well, I think with our growing ageing population, that probably won't be. You'll be coming back for an expansion, but it just makes it more practical.
And bridge is growing nationally as we all get older.
Councillor Brosnan, followed by Councillor Tapani, and then Councillor Price.
Yeah, I'd just like to congratulate your club really on the process you've gone through to get to this point. It was a very comprehensive business plan, and obviously quite a collaborative effort you've gone to in pulling that together, and I love your model as well. I did have a question in reading the business plan. You do talk about the possibility of the Pirates Club, which I know had previously thought about relocating to a similar area, and I think you made a note in your business plan, I can't actually find it now, I read it a little earlier, that that was a discussion that was still open but is a timing issue or something to that effect. Would you mind just enlightening us about how those conversations are going?
We want, because we're in the Whitmore Park area and that's proving to be quite unsafe, we want to move as soon as possible, and from our discussions with Pirates, they are nowhere near ready to move. I would say it will probably be at least a year before they are ready to go. And I think, yes, that's probably as much as I should say.
Where those discussions are at.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just a follow-on question, mine's also about timing. So just to reiterate the comments from our other councillors, you've got all the cards in your hand with regards to background and the presentation, so well done. I hope you win the suit. But my question was around Really encouraging to hear that there's positive conversations happening with the rugby union. What I didn't quite pick up in the presentation was, what about the timing of your groups meeting with the potential rugby site? Have you found alignment there? Does that work well for both the Bridge Group and the rugby union?
Yes, it does.
Fantastic, thank you.
Councillor Price.
We had a very positive meeting with Jay Campbell, the Chief Executive, and he advised us to write to the board, which is what we've done. So whether the board will be as enthusiastic, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, you've done the work, so.
Okay, well done. Yeah, good presentation. The question I have is, we are an ageing population, and how much have you future-proofed in the building you've got now? So if you put that building up, would it be full straight away, or have you got a little bit of leeway for?
We don't own this building, the Napier.
I know the one you're looking at doing.
This building.
Yeah.
In what way did you mean?
So we've got an ageing population. It's your game's popular, so there's obviously going to be growth. Have you catered for growth so that you open today and tomorrow you're full?
Since Kevin created that little model, we've even had in-house discussions that we may put an extra room on the end, and that's why we've allowed that in the square footage that we require.
Okay. Thank you.
This allows for 24 tables, and we would probably average well less than that at normal bridge sessions. But when we have tournaments, 24 would well accommodate.
So you got room for a bit of growth in your
Yes.
plan. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson, then Councillor Mawson.
Thank you for your presentation and the business case that you presented. Just on your site options, you're the Taradale Bridge Club, but you've identified a Taradale site which is not far from your original home, with an indication that the parking is the issue. If parking wasn't an issue, would that be your preferred site? That's the Bledisloe Park site.
Parking is an issue.
I think
No, I said if the parking was not an issue, would that have become your preferred site?
I guess we tried to be pragmatic in our choices, and we didn't discuss it as if there's going to be no cars in the future to be worried about. But I think one of the things about Park Island is there are another number of opportunities, like with the rugby union, where we can perhaps build a shared facility potentially. Whereas if we go to Taradale by itself, then we might be quite isolated as far as other organisations wanting to use us or would be part of that build.
Thank you.
Well done on a good presentation, and I support you. My positive ageing is actually my portfolio, so I certainly know through my business of personal training that yes, the boomers are coming through. So yeah, I mean the questions I had were actually covered by the other councillors, so yeah, well done.
Councillor Bowe.
Yes, well done. Thank you for the presentation. Great to see so many of your members here. There's a question, it might be answered in your presentation, but nobody else has asked, is how much would that building cost you? You have $500,000. I mean, it's probably none of my business, but how much extra funding would you require to build what you want?
Some of it depends on how much car parking we have to pay for, and then the location will dictate that. But we think that we can build something similar to this for around about the 500. We're having discussions with the Lottery Commission and other people for funds already, and we're looking at putting together a feasibility study so we can to back up any application we would have from a major funder, and we've actually had discussions with people to do those feasibility studies. So we're kind of hinging on today, really.
Other clubs also have raised debentures from their members, and that's something that we could certainly look at too. You can see what a supportive membership we have.
Councillor Taylor.
Congratulations on your presentation. Just a question, if the Whitmore Park site is not suitable, is there the possibility in the future of amalgamation or the site, your site, being shared with the Napier Bridge Club, so that both?
Yes, that we've been approached by the Napier Bridge Club along those lines. We're having a meeting in a couple of weeks to discuss that. At the moment, our real focus is on our building, but it's very possible that it will be a joint venture.
Thank you.
No further questions. I'd just like to reiterate also thank you for your presentation. It's clear that you've done your homework and you've well researched how to make this happen for your club. So with regards to process from here, we will talk to council staff and no doubt be back in touch with you as well with regards to preparing a formal paper to come to council to make a decision on finding the right place and then moving forward with that potential lease. So we will certainly be keeping in touch with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
I think some people may leave here.
Yes. We'll wait a moment to give people a chance to leave. We're used to it, Ash. We're used to it.
So if you extend it, would it be the same profile? Or would
Yeah,
it
it would only just be, well,
It was great.
yeah, a bit longer.
So you wouldn't drop the roof line down and
No,
you haven't got the scope to do that?
Well, you can do, yeah, because they've done it that way because if you have a full thing, when you've got, because of the width of the building, costs and that have to be certain way, that's why it's made it to them like that.
Yeah. No, but it also breaks the line. It
Yeah, it
looks
does.
quite neat, doesn't it? Yeah.
Leave the model here.
I promise I'll return it. My 2-year-old daughter might not say the same thing. Good on you, mate. Well done.
And the roof.
Come down to funding, if they can get more money for the
It looks like a place should be able to
Yeah, exactly. So it could be a lot.
Yeah, either way, yeah, it can.
Either end can be in. That way, business, that end's just blank, so you'd be able to.
Yeah, whatever, yeah. So you can either go out or along that way.
Oh, there's heaps here by that where the rugby union's gone.
By the stream, soccer.
You want the hockey.
I'm not really just had the hockey area.
Yeah, it's a good parking there where they've built that. And I'm just finding that
Does it clean out?
The rep guys got a rugby. Tried to put some. What was it clean out? It was a good clean out.
Tuesday, away at this.
And nobody left.
It's Napier City Business Inc. They got no supporters.
Or did they get swept out with the with the tide?
Are they even here?
We made a lot of parking money this morning, though.
Okay.
Who's your man?
He's
After the
I don't think
seminar
he's,
that
they're
the
doing
Revenue
this,
and
they're coming at
Finance
7. I didn't see that.
We've got Council HB.
And it's
Right, so we are no longer having a presentation by Napier City Business Inc. So that will be coming to our next council meeting now, which means we move into the formal part of our meeting and announcements from myself. Really just a welcome back, everybody. Happy New Year. Hard to believe it's the 30th of January already. I hope everyone had a good break and is feeling recharged and energised and ready to tackle the year ahead of us. Now, do we have any minor matters that we would wish to discuss at the end of the meeting? No, very good. Any announcements by management? No. Excellent. So confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting held Thursday the 19th of December 2019. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Price. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And our first agenda item is the 2019 to 2022 triennial agreement. Now this is a draft for feedback. I would note that Hastings and Central Hawke's Bay councils have both already adopted the draft, and as per my recommendation, I'm happy with it as drafted. We did meet as a mayoral group to discuss this and made some amendments to the original draft that came to us. Is there any questions from the floor? Or Debbie, did you want to add anything to, or Wayne, add anything to?
Probably just to add to you, through you, Madam Mayor. So the triennial agreement, what it's doing is it's setting the, how the councils interact, communicate between each other, but also it sets that the strategic priorities where they're going to focus on. So there's been a lot of discussion at the Mayoral Forum around those priorities. They align very much with what's in the Matariki strategy, and then that's obviously then driving the council's work program. So there's been quite a lot of discussion and alignment with that.
Just a quick, oh, sorry.
No, no.
No, you.
Just a question. Have there been many changes, through you, Madam Chair, from the previous triennial agreement? Has it seen a lot of changes?
The main change would be that alignment, as Wayne said, to the Matariki Regional Development Strategy, and to ensure that it is meeting, the same objectives that we're setting out to achieve there. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, I've got 4 questions, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
The first being, I assume that any amendments that Hastings and the other local authorities have put forward are included in this version?
My understanding is that they adopted the draft as is. They didn't make any amendments.
Thank you. Has there been a decision who's going to chair the forum for the next 3 years?
So the mayoral forum itself, yes, is chaired by Mayor Alex Walker of Central Hawke's Bay.
Item 6, or whatever it is, section 6 talks about achievement reports. Have any achievement reports been provided to the new forum?
Not as yet, no.
And the third one, and it may be a rollover of the page, but under Annex 1, portfolios, the 3 waters doesn't appear to have a lead identified, unless it's a rollover because of the table splits onto 2 pages. I was just a bit unsure about how that appeared.
What page was that on, sorry, Councillor Simpson?
I don't know, I haven't got a page number. It was Annex 1.
15?
Appendix 1. Is that reporting?
Water safety security planning, is that
6
the
or
one?
8?
Looking at that 3 waters one, lead in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be missing down into the table at the bottom there.
Right.
The orders?
So we will just ensure that that is.
And that's
Yeah.
through Napier. So that's the lead through that is through Napier City Council.
Okay, that's right. I just thought I had an interest in that one.
Yes, absolutely.
That's all, thank you.
Thank you. There's no further questions. Do I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mawson and Councillor Simpson. Did you wish to speak to the paper, Councillor Mawson?
It's all well thought out.
Councillor Simpson?
I think I've said enough, thank you.
Was there anybody else wishing to speak to the paper or ask debate? No? I will therefore put the motion that we adopt the draft triennial agreement. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And our second agenda item is the 2019 to 2022 standing orders. I just would like to advise that I have an amendment to the officer's recommendation, which is an addition to Part B, in that there is one other change to, or departure from the LGNZ model template, Standing Order 21.2A. Movers of motions when speaking to the motion not more than 10 minutes, which has been our practice in the past, and the LGNZ template is 5 minutes, so just foreshadowing that I would intend to make that amendment. And now I'll pass over to Devora to speak to the paper, please.
Oh, you're doing a great job. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'll try and keep this brief, because my understanding is that you've had a really good opportunity to have a look through the template. As you'll know, a council must have a set of standing orders, but it doesn't necessarily need to change anything from the previous triennium. But what does happen is that Local Government New Zealand, so the umbrella body, about every 3 years they do a bit of a review of these foundation type documents. They do often make some tweaks and changes to update them to the current day and based on things that councils may have raised over the previous 3 years. And that becomes what we refer to as a model template. Most councils end up either adopting that as is or with some minor tweaks, which is what we're exploring today. There are a couple of councils that I'm aware of that go fully bespoke. More power to them. I suppose the advantage of at least basing your standing orders on the work that Local Government New Zealand undertakes is that they have the advantage of the feedback coming in and knowing what they've discussed with councils across the country. The standing orders are not intended to be completely black and white. That would be impossible in order for them to fully address every single possible option or convolution that would come up for every single council. They do their absolute best, but they're still very open as an organisation to discussing things through, to taking advice as to where standing orders in the law interact, and so on and so forth. So they're a really good basis to work from. Today, as you'll have seen, there are a number of minor adjustments that have been proposed for Napier City Council itself to work in with how the council, some preferences of the mayor, how they tend to work. So if you'll bear with me, I'll just run through those really briefly. I won't touch on Standing Orders 21.2a, which the mayor has just mentioned, but that is, as she's touched on, just the proposal is rather than to go with the model template, to retain 10 minutes speaking rights for the mover of a motion. So Standing Orders 9.10, this is very much about an internal setting. So the law requires that agendas for scheduled meetings, so not extraordinary meetings but ordinary meetings, must be produced at least 2 full working days in advance of the meeting. Our internal setting for this triennium extends that to give you a little bit more time to engage with the paperwork, which, as you're discovering, can be extensive. And so the proposal is to change that to a full week. So you'll be, for a Thursday meeting, just as an example, you'll be receiving the public agenda on a Wednesday evening at the latest. So that's that change there. So we're hoping that that makes things easier for you, essentially. And it's a good opportunity also because these are the public agendas that we're talking about. You will also be receiving any public excluded material, but the public agendas will also be on the web 7 days early, so it gives the public a good opportunity to engage with what's going on as well. So Standing Orders 15.1 and 16.1 are both in relation to ways that the public can directly engage with you as part of your meetings through public forum, which we've just experienced, or strictly speaking, it was a deputation today because it was a specific representative group from an organisation. So that's why we're making the same adjustment of time, speaking time to public forum and deputations. The only difference is that public forum is just a member of the public and a deputation is a representative of a group.
I'll just ask a question. If the rules are the same, we actually, if these were in place, 3 speakers from the Bridge Club would not have been able to speak. Because it says 2 from any organisation and 3 in total public forum. So only 2 people from that Bridge Club could have spoke.
The fun thing with this particular standing order is that the chair or the presiding member of a meeting can generally override it. But yes, absolutely, if you want to remove that specificity, that's absolutely a tweak that we can make.
I'm just raising it.
Yeah.
That we've had an example of that today.
do it on
Have a
12.
desire to remove the two, bearing in mind that the chair can override it anyway. Yeah.
Can I just ask about the chair being able to override it? It doesn't actually say that the chair can override it. Or is that just understood?
Chairperson has discretion.
Sure. So we've got where the number of speakers presenting in a public forum exceeds 3 in total, the chairperson has discretion to restrict the speaking time permitted for all presenters. And in general, the chairperson or the meeting can say that they wish people to speak longer. So there is that flexibility. If you have any concerns at all, I'd recommend just taking that word out or taking that sentence out, and then there's no query on it whatsoever.
Is it worth keeping it in case we have someone that wants to have 12 or 24 presenters?
And that would be my fear.
Yep. Yeah. And then they will get 5 minutes each or something. And yeah.
I'm quite happy to leave it as is on the basis that the chair does have the ability to override it. Councillor, something?
Just for purposes of consistency, Madam Chair, the section 17.2 is about presentation of petitions. It restricts speakers to 5 minutes for purposes of consistency with presentations. And the other version, I wonder whether that should be 10 minutes.
Yes, I agree.
So,
There's a formatting issue, Madam Chair, on 13.14.
Make a note of that, and yeah. Which clause was it? Sorry.
13.14.
Yep, thank you. Noted. Okay, so just for clarity, there's another potential foreshadowed amendment there for 17.2. Is general comfort with that? Okay. Thank you.
Just on that 15.1,
Yep.
would it clarify if we said the chairperson has discretion to restrict or extend, yeah, that's the word, the speaking time or the number?
So we have a period of up to 45 minutes or such longer as the meeting may determine. Will be available for the public forum at each scheduled local authority meeting.
The last sentence of that one says that we can make it shorter if we want, but the mayor can, but also saying that she can make it longer or increase the number of speakers. Or if it's just understood, then it's no problem.
We can specify that the number could be increased. That could be a useful specification. Just thinking about 2.5 years' time when this comes up, maybe it's worth specifying. So no more than 2 speakers can speak on behalf of an organisation during a public forum unless otherwise decided by the meeting. Are you happy with that?
Yeah. I suppose if a member of the public was coming to present and they were looking at this document, they would know that they could ask for permission to extend it.
Devora, can I ask you a question of interpretation? 16.1, when we're talking about time limits under deputations, it's got a list of reasons why the chairperson can decline or cut short, essentially, a deputation if it's being offensive, repetitive, etc.
Yep.
The last, or the second to bottom one of those bullet points has an and I suspect that should be an or, in that a speaker doesn't need to be doing all of those things before before the chair has discretion. It's probably one.
I think that's a challenge.
Might be a challenge to get those into 10 minutes, but you probably could do it.
I think that's a typo in the template. Thank you for picking that up. That could have been
We may wish to let
exciting.
LGNZ know.
Thank you for that. I've flagged that in there.
No worries.
Well, the same would apply
Yes,
for...
that could somewhat restrict things.
Would that then apply for 15.2 as well?
Yes, there'll be a list there too. Yes, correct.
Maybe just run a double check over that before
Yeah.
we adopt.
No, that's a nice pick up, thank you. Hopefully we don't strike someone that's exhibiting all of the behaviours at the time. Are there any other questions in relation to public interaction in a meeting? So 15, 16. Okay.
Can I just ask something? I'm just looking for it here. People wanting to make a presentation are supposed to contact the council one clear day beforehand or at the discretion of the chair. It seems to me, is that reasonable? It leaves the door open for somebody coming in to the meeting and saying, I want to speak in a deputation. Do we want that? One clear day to me seems quite a reasonable request.
One clear day is preferable from a logistics perspective, particularly with a 10 a.m. start, when we, who would generally be receiving the request and negotiating with the presiding member, are often down setting up by sort of 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. But at the end of the day, we need to be really careful because we don't at all want to restrict public interaction with the council. And there is the possibility that that might do it. So so that's, I guess, the slightly awkward tension that the standing orders is trying to manage. So yes, the full working day at least is absolutely preferable because it gives everybody an idea of what's coming up. But ultimately, if someone has a burning desire to speak to council at that time, then it is over to the presiding member to manage that and make the decision on the morning, and we just roll with it from there. But yeah, great question. Excuse me. Right, Standing Orders 19. So this is more in relation to voting now. So the first is just a really minor tweak where the model template says that the Chief Executive must record the names of the members voting for and against the motion, etc. Now, I have yet to see a Chief Executive literally doing this, so we are allowing, because their focus is very much better spent elsewhere, so we're just making a very minor tweak to allow for the delegate of the Chief Executive to do that on their behalf, which is what happens in actual life. So I hope you're okay with that. Yeah, great. Fantastic. Okay. The other change, so Standing Orders 19.6. So this is one that's primarily about corrects and historical records keeping. So in the past, if you have voted against and I think abstained, you've been asked if you want that to be recorded in the minutes. What happens is that if you say no, despite having taken a stand on the day, it's not recorded. The decision then appears as unanimous. So the historical record is wrong. And obviously now that things are live streamed, that does change things a little bit. But we want to make sure that the written records match what actually happened in terms of what was videoed. But it's also really important, so we get a lot of requests from people looking back on who voted this way for this decision, and sometimes it can be 20 years previous for the decision, and they want to know how things stacked up over time. And someone may have had a really strong stance in the meeting, decided for their own reasons at the time not to have it recorded. Their really strong stance may in the future have been proved right, but as far as the record is concerned, it was a unanimous decision. So we just want to make sure that the voting is really clear, that the historical record is correct, and so that's why we're proposing that all voting, regardless of where you sit, will automatically be recorded. You won't need to ask for that, and because it's already captured in the live stream, it aligns better. So hopefully you're comfortable with that.
Just a question about that. Do other councils do that? I see it's not in the template, that particular provision. Do other councils do that? I mean, I think it's a good idea. I'm just curious.
I would admit I haven't asked the council specifically on this one. There will be a mix, and increasingly, yes, as councils move towards electronic voting systems, this will automatically be done. So this is a manual version of an electronic system that increasing numbers of councils are starting to put in place.
Can I just get clarification of 13.3, the casting vote?
Can we?
We're going to discuss that separately. Yes.
You can, yes. Okay, Standing Order 22.1. So this is in relation to the style of debate, essentially. Previously, Napier City Council has preferred option C, which tends to be relatively informal as to who can speak when, and it does allow for a little bit more flexibility as the discussion evolves, which option A most definitely does not. It's our most formal and traditional position. Option B is a bit of a mix. Option C allows for when particularly new substantial amendments might be made, that having spoken to anything previously doesn't preclude you from speaking to that amendment. So it keeps your discussion opportunities open, essentially, and allows all the members to continue to participate. So that has been what we've used over the last 3 years, and it's proposed to continue with that option because it works.
That's a good reason.
It's always handy.
It's all about amendments, isn't it? Anybody can make an amendment, of the original motion or not.
Yeah.
Yep.
Before we move on, Debbie, I have just noticed in the Standing Order 9.10 regarding the working days required, or the days required for an agenda to be released.
Yep.
I think it should just be 7 clear days, not working days, because if it was working days, it would be the Monday
thank
evening that you would need. We won't do that to you.
Chuck in a few stats, be all over.
Thank you for picking that up. I appreciate that kindness. Yes, actually something, thank you for pointing that out, and something that I haven't touched on there is that you'll notice under 9.1 that there is currently one managed exception to that, which is for tenders hearings. So we are in the process of allocating more standard times for tenders hearings to be run within, in order for the team to be able to successfully negotiate that with the demands of the tender process. We would appreciate agendas only being due to the legislative timeframe for those. And as the implementation of the Mulder Committee is undertaken, we're also requesting that, because that is likely to meet monthly as well, that also become a managed exception. So that may be an amendment to these standing orders, because we're not quite at that position yet. But again, for a monthly meeting, producing an agenda 7 days in advance means that you're sort of writing things as soon as the previous meeting is over. So it's just about sort of managing those logistics. So that is something that we'll discuss. But the tenders hearing is quite important as a managed exception. So, yeah. So thank you. All right. Were there any further questions on the other standing orders? Because if not, then we'll open the discussion on casting vote and just talk about that for a little bit.
Through Madam Mayor. There was just one thing, Debbie. 21.2. There's 5 minutes highlighted. Is that a change?
So yes, sorry. That was highlighted in green because it was a change in the model template from what had previously been in place. That is now, but at the time that the agenda was produced, discussion hadn't been had in terms of retaining the 10 minutes for the mover of a motion. So that's one of the 2 proposed amendments to our recommendation now. So it sounds like the general preference is that the mover retains the right to speak for 10 minutes. So, yeah. Yeah, no, thank you.
On a whole, can I just say, I think the template, particularly the modellings, the motions and amendments and flowcharts, I think they're going to be particularly useful for us newbies, and I found them quite interesting reading. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think they'll be very good.
Yeah, local government in New Zealand do a fantastic job. They put a whole lot of work and thinking into it, so it's really, really useful. Okay, casting vote. Always fun.
What number is it, sorry?
19.3.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're happy to bear with me a little bit, I'll talk briefly as to what a casting vote actually is. And then some of the options that can be explored, and then obviously the discussion is yours to have as to where you fall on this one. So a casting vote is essentially a tiebreaker. So it's only ever required when the number of councillors or elected members in the room is even. If you have an odd number of elected members at the meeting, then it's not required because it's assumed that you will have a tiebreaker, you're one person. So that means for Napier that casting vote would only ever, even if you had it in place, it would only ever be a potential option if 1, 3 or 5 of you were away from a meeting. If 7 of you are away, then we can't have the meeting at all. So that because we don't have quorum. So in essence, it provides to the presiding member of a meeting, so the chair of the meeting, and we say presiding member because the person in charge of a meeting at any given time may be the chair. Most of the year is the chair. On occasion, if the chair is unable to attend the meeting, it will be the deputy chair. On what we hope are very rare occasions, neither may be able to attend, in which case the meeting itself must vote a presiding member into place, and that person would take on a casting vote if it's in play. So that's why we use that terminology. All right. So in essence, it is providing a second tiebreaker vote to the presiding member in the case where there's an equality of votes. So it's giving, the best description is that it's giving the vote of one of the absent members, not necessarily how they would vote, but their opportunity to vote to the presiding member to break a tie. So even if you had even members present in the meeting, it still may not be necessary because there may be a very clear position either way. So that is the casting vote.
Just a question, what if someone abstains from voting? What, it changes you move from odds to evens or evens to odds?
Honestly, I would suspect that the best option, if there's any likelihood of that, would be to leave the matter on the table, to have a certain amount of discussion or to leave the matter on the table. Abstaining is an interesting one. Not every council actually allows that in a vote either.
Would you be forced to vote?
If the opportunity to abstain is removed from the standing orders, then yes, you must take a position either way. And ultimately, I mean, you can challenge me on this, but there may be things, and particularly in the realm of conscience type matters, where abstaining is an option. But in general, the community are looking for a decision, whatever that decision is, and abstaining removes you from that decision. So, so choosing to abstain, you'd want to weigh up pretty carefully as to when you did that. But yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I don't know whether it's been specifically considered. I might have a chat to Mike Reid at our Gen Z about it.
Would a possible solution be that in a casting vote situation that abstentions are not allowed? Why could we not do that?
Yeah.
Through the chair, we had an example in the past where it was all changed by the person leaving the meeting. So they didn't have to make a decision, they can just choose not to be here.
Yeah, you could just walk out.
Yeah. And there is some discussion about ways that, or other options that can be put in place, casting vote or not. For example, for certain decisions, you could set a particular majority of voting that you wanted to reach before that particular decision could proceed. So there are some other options that can run alongside casting vote. Coming back to the casting vote specifically just for the moment, because I think those are some useful discussion points that you can work through. As far as the position on the casting vote itself is concerned, the Local Government Act The default is not to have one unless standing orders direct otherwise. So essentially it leaves it up to the individual councils. The model template default, as it were, is to have a casting vote. There have been some significant decisions that have taken place. It is an accepted democratic practice. Thinking of another council that had 2 casting votes in the same meeting on the same general topic of quite large significance, so it's certainly not unknown. Beg your pardon. So there are some different positions there, but ultimately the Act actually leaves it up to the councils, and if the councils decide not to put anything in place, the default will be none, the status quo. So that is casting vote itself. Keith has raised a really interesting possibility where someone abstains, and something that we had considered in terms of sort of preparing for the discussion that you're likely to have on this is that there can be instances, so without a casting vote, if you have a tie, so an equality of voting, then the status quo is retained because no new decision has been passed, right? So there may be some scenarios where the status quo is actually untenable. So that's why we started to think about casting vote or no casting vote. There may be some other things that you want to think about where it is, for whatever reason, the status quo, so maintaining what isn't actually possible to continue with anymore, and you do actually need a decision. What happens in those instances? So it's just worth thinking about these types of things as part of these discussions. So,
So an example of that would potentially be the adoption of your long-term plan.
yes, and there are certain, there may be certain contractual type issues where timing is particularly important. So even laying the matter on the table may not be an option. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're talking about possibilities that may be quite narrow and few, but it's just considering them, or at least recognising that they may be there when you have the discussions.
Through the chair, do you find that if we have a double debate set up, that it would sort of take away half the issues we could have? Like if it's a tie at a committee meeting, then we will at least get a second shot at it at a formal council meeting. So rather than have to make the casting vote at the committee meeting stage, we do get that second stage to do it.
In some ways, because of the double debate, because of the double debate, a tie at a committee level is almost the same. It would have the same effect as laying the matter on the table because it doesn't progress any further.
Correct.
Yeah. So it just procedurally it doesn't have a huge amount of effect. It just means that the committee is deciding by a different route to lay it on the table. Rather than a specific decision too, it's a decision by voting too. Yeah.
If we didn't have a casting vote in that situation, if we did have a tie, would laying it on the table cause any difference then?
At committee level, not necessarily, no. There may be the odd occasion where a decision, what's called a decision of council, has been brought through to a committee. And yes, that may have some impacts because that generally only happens because of timing issues in the first place. But in general, no, it's just procedurally two paths to the same point.
Right.
practically the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just getting back, Devi, to the issue if we have legislative requirements to pass our LTP, for example, we don't have a casting vote, it's a 6-6 or whatever. Should we have something in there that we don't have a casting vote unless there are legislative requirements or deadlines that need to be met?
There are a number of different options that you can explore in terms of what you put into your standing orders. In terms of the LTP, we probably need to be clear. If you had so by the time you get to adopting the LTP, so at the end of June, or an annual plan for that matter, it is essentially the administrative approval of your entire decision-making process to that point. So if you've got a situation where you need a casting vote at that point, you're in trouble.
Yeah, okay.
Where it's more likely to hit is coming out of your deliberation point. So that's early June. So in terms of both your major planning cycles in terms of your corporate planning, so annual plans and particularly long-term plans, because that impacts for significant periods of time. But typically the timing is the same, that you'll have some kind of hearing. It may not be called that specifically, but some kind of registering of community feedback, whether that's the community feedback meetings that were held last year, more formal hearings, some way to engage with the submissions. You'll have your written submissions, and then you always have a significant period of time, it's often a full day or longer, for you to deliberate on and consider those submissions as a whole. And an extensive discussion period where you're coming through. It is most helpful, that would be where there was more likelihood, I guess, of there being a casting vote if someone wasn't able to make that discussion, because remember you'd have to have 12 of you for this to even be triggered, potentially. But also, so that's where it's more likely to happen, but also it's where it's of more concern, because it's that meeting that directs officers as to what the final plan is going to look like. So if it's really unclear at that point, then that leaves officers in quite an awkward position when they've got to prepare that, have it audited by Audit New Zealand on Council's behalf, and then come through for your administrative approval. So so you may want to think about a setting majority vote, or you may want to just commit to a really in-depth discussion and hashing it out until you get to a point where a significant number of you are really happy with what's going forward. And given that we're talking about 10 years plus, particularly for the long-term plan, that may be a really good idea, so that you're all really clear about what you want moving forward, rather than leaving it hanging on a vote. Councillor Wright.
Because we now have the ability through standing orders to be not to be physically absent from a meeting, but to be either phoned in on a screen or online, that lessens the chance of having to get to a situation where you have a casting vote. That's
Agreed.
Given us a much more better range, and we did a few times last term, and I feel that the chances of this happening are getting slimmer because of those kinds of new rules that have been brought in. So that gives me a bit more comfort that we won't get to this, because as Kirsten rang from LA, I think it was, and I was down the South Island and sat in a room and did a 3-hour meeting. So, it's possible, and everything being electronic now, you've got your papers wherever you are in the world. So it's not as critical, I think, as it has been in that sense.
Yeah, there are some great options in terms of meeting participation now, which are available.
Can I just say that the casting vote notion was very unpopular, or generally unpopular with the public, and I know this is debating it, but I think we should go without it, and we have the opportunity, 75% of us, to change these standing orders if that hasn't worked out or it's caused any problems. So I think it's a good idea not to have the casting vote.
Interestingly, the other option, which has literally just occurred to me as we're talking, is that you are able, of course, by a majority of the meeting, to suspend standing orders. So you could have the option, if you defaulted to no casting vote, to choose for a particular meeting or for a particular item to suspend that standing order. Don't suspend all of them, please. But you could, thinking about it, it would be perfectly appropriate to suspend that particular one, which would have the effect of putting a casting vote in place for that matter, if you believed it appropriate.
As long as you can get agreement to.
But you need your 75% to pass that. So,
Casting vote on that one.
and in the
Sorry, clarification, clarification, Devora. You said by a majority you can suspend a standing order, and then you just said 75%.
So that is, that is the majority. So,
But couldn't you do it the other way as well? Keep the casting vote
Yes,
provision in,
absolutely.
and then at the meeting, if it's critical, decide to suspend it for that particular.
yes, that can work either way. So you
I'd
could
prefer
have
it to work that way.
Yeah, you could have the casting vote in place and decide that you didn't want it for a particular reason.
Just while discussing options, is another option to retain the casting vote, but put conditions on when it would automatically not apply to a particular matter, for example, except for decisions of council at a committee stage, and except for matters which are about strategic assets or about matters which have triggered a certain level in our significant and engagement policy, or matters exceeding a certain dollar value. Is that an option?
Yes, that is. If the default was to have the casting vote except in those instances, that would mean that you would need to think about implications of a tied vote occurring for any of those, and whether you want to put anything in place in order to address any unintended consequences of status quo being maintained for those particular decisions. But that again could be something that you might consider as a meeting closer to those particular instances.
Just through the chair, if we do have a tied vote, do we not have the option of just coming back in 2 days' time for an extraordinary meeting?
That depends on your value of my health.
And you have to give 7 days' notice?
Not for
You
extraordinary.
have to give at least
Can't you
24 hours
adjourn or
notice.
suspend the
so, yeah.
meeting?
Oh, only a day then.
You could
We could adjourn or suspend it for
Adjourn
a
the
certain number of
meeting.
hours or 24 hours, couldn't we, and just re-adjourn?
Correct.
And that would be
Yes.
much easier, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Would that need to be done with 75%?
Logistically, not necessarily, but certainly procedurally in terms of the requirements. There are still some notification requirements and agenda prep requirements around an extraordinary meeting. So yes, there would be there would be some advantages to that, certainly.
Excuse me, sorry, through Madam Mayor. Would that need to have a 75% majority to have that suspended, or is that Chair's responsibility?
An adjournment can be done by the chair.
Adjournment doesn't require that level of majority. Yeah.
So we have a number of options before us. My preference is to not have a casting vote, however, then have the option to, with a majority, introduce it should it be required. So we do need to frame this up to form part of the recommendation, so I'd be interested to hear other views around the table. Councillor Wright's said the opposite to me.
Yeah, I think I'll maintain that, because I absolutely believe that there are times when a council has to make a really difficult decision and there's no way out of it. And that's our duty. And so I'm not a fan of casting votes, but I think it needs to be an option in there. And because sometimes everyone's going to get to a stalemate, and whatever you thought of the pool debate, we had 51% of people who wanted the pool and 49% who didn't. So it was very close. And our voting actually reflected the community at that time. Okay, it did change, maybe, but we didn't know that because we didn't have any figures. But for the LTP, that was us, and we actually reflected that in our own decision. We were actually representing the community. So I'm a fan of the casting vote, and I like the idea that if we have a majority that chooses not to do it for a particular thing, we can do it that way. So if the majority of us don't want to go with the casting vote on that particular issue, that we can count, there's a provision in the standing orders to say, right, we're going to have a vote, this is a casting vote situation, do you want us to remove that by vote now? And it might be 75% of us don't care, but we should have the vote at the time. And that's how I feel about it, really.
And I guess just to provide the basis for my opposite opinion, I'm firmly of the belief, particularly for a significant agenda item, that if the vote is split like that, there's a need to go away and gather more information before making a final decision. So that's sort of why I would be more comfortable with doing it that opposite way, no casting vote unless a majority agreed to allow it.
I just have a question.
Yep.
How would we know, or practically, how does it work? Because we wouldn't know we're in a casting vote situation until we'd voted. So we couldn't decide whether it was going to be a casting vote situation before we...
At that point you would then...
At that point we would do it. Okay.
Or you would know that you have an even number of elected members with potentially sensitive or significant decisions, so you could make the decision even before voting at that point. And you may not know that it was going to be a casting vote, but you can preclude the opportunity for it to be.
That would be today, though. We'd be doing that every meeting. Well, not every meeting, but frequently.
Yes, Councillor Price.
Just so when you're making a decision on a casting vote, and the chair has made a recommendation on the paper, surely it's pretty clear which way the casting vote will go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if they make a recommendation and then vote against it, it's getting a little bit confusing.
It would be unusual for a presiding member to use their deliberative and casting votes in different ways, yes.
So then what I'm saying is you're then getting into a position that you can, a group could decide that they do want a casting vote because they know that the chair's on their side. So it's quite messy, and a lot of the time we have these rules not for everything that runs smooth, for the people that might want to play the system or something like that. And so I don't think in my mind I've answered it.
So what do you support?
Yeah, I don't know if I've got an answer to it yet.
Councillor McGrath.
Just through the chair, I'd like to think that when we have our debate, all members of the council are listening to the debate and not going in predetermined.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting
Well
statement.
said.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
I'm in a similar boat that I probably don't particularly have a strong opinion either way, but one of the things I think is if we were to leave the casting vote in but make it not applicable to committee decisions of council, so that means you couldn't get a final decision at committee, it would need to go either through double debate back to full council, then that presiding member is always the mayor, and to me that is democracy and that is accountability, that the person who is elected to head up this council, and we know your views and the way that you would apply the not using a casting vote, for instance, that discretion comes back to you. So in my view, if we were to leave the casting vote in but remove the ability to use it at committee level, then it always falls to your discretion.
Unless I'm not here at the council meeting and someone else is acting.
You've been kidnapped.
I mean, I am quite comfortable with that suggestion. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'm reasonably comfortable with that. The comment I was going to make is that I would support keeping it in there with the proviso that it can only be used at that second stage. The one thing I was a little bit concerned about, if we start trying to list when it can't be used, then you get a situation of oh God, we didn't think of that one, and you might leave something out. So I think
Longer and
a
longer.
basic rule, which yours presently is, leave it in there, but it can only be used at full council, not committee level, then it reverts back to the mayor and or deputy probably at that time. So I'd be relatively comfortable with that one.
Just a question, sorry. Just a clarification of what Annette's saying is, so at a committee meeting you could end up with a draw and it just goes to the council meeting. That's all. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
So, and the same
Yeah,
as laying it
no,
on the
I-
table, essentially. So,
Yeah.
result.
No, that's cool.
I like that because it gives us some time to, another week to actually talk about it and get some more questions and information and answers. So that's pretty good compromise.
Councillor Tapner, you look deep in thought.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I did, as with last term, I came in very clearly in my head on one point of this discussion, but as a result of what's transpired in front of us, I'm now... So I actually quite like Deputy Mayor's suggestion that we provide the ability to move that from a committee to the main council. I also would like to see that the presiding member maintains the integrity of their role and the ability to make those discretionary decisions. The casting vote, as I understand it, is only really designed to help facilitate a decision where there are even numbers. If there is an odd number of us, then the result will potentially be clearer. So at this stage, I think I quite like the idea of we've got a range of mechanisms. We've got a new format for which we can engage as councillors over issues. So there's a whole range of issues to provide us with a good ability to engage with the topic. And the casting vote really is the last port of call. So a combination of those things gives me a lot of confidence we may not need to get there. But I think the Deputy Mayor's suggestion provides us with a breathing space to have more in-depth discussion, which is aligned with your expressions, Your Worship. So I actually probably would prefer that alternative. Originally, I was seeking to not support or to have the casting vote removed because in an even situation, when you know every person's vote, essentially if it's 6-6 and one person has the casting vote, then there's only one person voting at the table, not 12. And so for me, that completely undermines the democratic process, doesn't open up controversial issues to good, robust debate, and it transfers the power wholly and completely into the trust of the presiding member who holds that casting vote. So, and I think within that, there's an element of risk that we need to acknowledge.
Councillor Brown.
This is tricky. I think I'm thinking along the lines of RP, and I think I'm coming around. I think the thing that I like the most is if we have an issue of major significance, for example, if the pool situation was to happen again, we would know that ahead of time and could make sure wherever in the world we were that we called in. And so for major issues that you had a strong point on, we could make sure that we had an uneven number of people.
Bearing in mind if it's health related, that
That
won't
was
be
it,
an
yeah.
option.
Say if we're able to.
As long as you can talk.
And think. Okay, so we do need to frame up how we would like this to be put into the recommendation. And there's been several speak in favour of the Deputy Mayor's recommendation that we retain a casting vote. However, it cannot be used in a committee or decision of council situation. Does anyone feel very strongly against including that suggestion in the recommendation?
I just want to ask a question. Because we've got a unique situation with our council having the double debating, is there anything in the template about decisions of council? what does a decision of council mean? We know that it means you're at a standing committee and the item has to be decided there and then rather than being taken to the full council meeting. Do we have anything here about that covers our unique situation of having the double debating and the decision of council?
Not specifically, that tends to be covered in the terms of reference in the delegations for the committees and the governance structure.
So is there any risk of having that as part of your standing orders, referencing to something that isn't necessarily defined within your standing orders?
Definition maybe.
If I may, through you, Madam Mayor, what I'm gathering would actually be a relatively simple tweak to Standing Orders 19.3 in the model template, which would cover us without even specifically drawing on double debate. So if you're happy for me. So we could say the mayor, chairperson or any other person presiding at a council meeting has a deliberative vote, and in the case of an equality of votes has a casting vote. A casting vote is not applicable at standing committees.
Okay.
Another question on that. If we've got require a decision of council which you need an answer to straight away, obviously there's a reason in a committee to have it in a committee meeting, and it's a drawn vote. How do we get on there?
Extraordinary.
It's your presiding member, isn't it?
You'd have to.
Or 75% could pass a change to standing orders in that meeting.
If I may, through the mayor, that could be an option where suspending that particular standing orders in order to require a majority vote as one option that you could consider at that time could be explored in advance of that particular vote.
Yeah.
So that could be the managed exception that you address at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Seeing nodding heads. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Would it, sorry, through you,
yeah.
Madam Mayor, would it be useful for us to run through what is now a substitute motion then?
Yes, thank you. It would
Okay,
be.
great. So, in relation to Part A, that Council confirm its position with regards to Standing Order 19.3 casting vote, that being the Mayor, Chairperson or any other person presiding at a Council meeting has a deliberative vote, and in the case of an equality of votes has a casting vote. A casting vote is not applicable at standing committees, so that's what we've just discussed. So that is your position, confirmed. And then that you adopt the 2019-22 standing orders noting the following departures from the model template. So these are as we've discussed. Standing orders 9.10, the change to the timing of agendas, so that becomes 7 days. Sorry, I'm summarising here because there are quite a few.
It's fine.
Great. Standing orders 15.1 and 16.1, the change to the speaking time. So both the length of public forum time to 45 minutes or as decided by the meeting, and per speaker of 10 minutes. With the additional amendment of just noting in 17.2 that speakers to petitions also have that right to speak to 10 minutes. Standing orders 19.5 and 6, thank you for that. That it may well be a delegate of the Chief Executive that's recording your voting, and that your voting will automatically be recorded as it has taken place. You won't need to request that. The noted amendment to Standing Orders 21.2a, so retaining the 10-minute speaking rights for the mover of a motion. And then Standing Orders 22.1, that option C will be the debate style that applies unless decided by the meeting at the time for a particular purpose.
Thank you for that summary, Debbie. I'm happy to, if there's no further questions of Debbie, I'm happy to move the motion, seconded by Councillor Tapani. I'd like to thank Debbie for all the work that she has done on this, and I guess the discussion today has arisen because we did find ourselves in a very unique situation, and we know that it can happen. It is very rare, but we need to ensure that we do have the correct standing orders and processes in place to enable us to do what we've been elected to do. And certainly the changes that we've made to the Local Government New Zealand model, from my perspective, the changes were made to enable our community to participate in a full way with our decision-making processes and give them the opportunities to come and talk to us in an environment that they're not feeling that they have to rush, and we really have a good opportunity to engage with them. So I'm pleased with where we have landed with this document, and Councillor Tapani, would you like to, or you can reserve your right to speak?
No, I'll save that for occasions. That's right. So I'm not wishing to add too much more other than to acknowledge that already since your election, Your Worship, you have provided a number of indicators to us as elected councillors that we're entering into a phase with more openness and transparency, and these rules are only a part of the tools help to service our ability to make decisions. So while we have some negative associations with the casting vote in the past, there are many indicators, not only from our councillors at the table, but also from your leadership, to suggest that we may never need to use these minor exceptions, but it's good to have the confidence of them.
Did anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Deputy
Yeah.
Mayor Rusman?
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. I was actually just going to share a very similar sentiment. Last term we had very negative connotations with the way that the casting vote was working in reality, and I don't think there was anyone who sat around that table that felt comfortable about the way that we came to an outcome. It wasn't an ideal situation. So just giving some assurance to the table that I share those views around its proper application, but there is a place for it, and I'm glad that we found a compromise that worked. So thank you for all of your leadership in this. I see some significant changes in here that, whilst maybe small, I think will allow us, this team, which is already very different to the previous term, to come to decision making that fits best. So thank you.
Councillor Price.
Just a quick comment. I like your attitude in that you've got the casting vote, and that you clearly outlined that if it's close, we probably need more information, and that's probably a really good guide to the way this will work.
There's no further discussion. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, and thank you, Debbie. And you can stay for the next agenda item.
And two further.
We might have a quick 2-minute break since we're losing 3 of our elected members.
It's a toilet break.
Thank you, Your
I'll
Worship.
take the opportunity.
Too young.
It says here a mover can reserve the
Yeah.
right to speak.
Second day.
So much water.